The president of Nigeria is one of the most powerful presidents on earth, not because of their status, but because of the constitutional powers that empowers them to do almost everything. There is nothing you are going to do in Nigeria without the approval of the president. So the federal system or the presidency system of government is totally different from the parliamentary system and other system of government. That makes them to be powerful. Now, I'm going to somewhere. You see, this issue of dragging people who work with president or who work with governors, especially people who are CBN governors, EFCC chairmen, there are some things that they cannot do on their own. A CBN governor cannot bring out any policy without the approval of the president. Now, one of the case the federal government have against Emefiele is the redesign of Naira, how they redesign our currency, and the thing was cast. So that is one of the suits against him. It doesn't make sense. The man has been bailed, and if the man goes to court with a good lawyer, the man will just go free. Now, I'm saying this because there is nothing Emefiele will do without the approval of Buhari. Why is it that in Nigeria, past presidents are never tried? They go away with everything they do. They go away with all the whole corruptions. Now, in some other African countries or some other part of the world, I do see where president will be persecuted, where he will be charged to court, arraigned before the court, and they will find him guilty. Even South Africa here, the former president Jacob Zuma, he faced, some charges. The court find him guilty. But in Nigeria, they will try to protect the president after power, and they will try to drag people who are subordinate. The reason why this case of Emefiele will not go well is because Emefiele received directions from Buhari. You cannot persecute Emefiele without persecuting Buhari, and that will make the case to be dead on arrival. Now, there is a video I saw on Arise News today. This man categorically explained everything you need to know about this case of Emefiele and the federal government. Take a listen.
Former Secretary to the Government of the Federation, Boss Mustafa, has reacted that he does not know anything about any $6.23 million. Ditto the CBN governor, who's just been, who has just perfected his bail conditions and released the home, Godwin Emefiele and this. How do you aggregate all this?
Well, I think first, this is all these stories, some of them mostly perhaps unverified or yet to be proven in a court of law. But again, it raises question around the stewardship of President Obasanjo or President Buhari. People forget the executive power of the federation is in the president.
Absolutely.
So he can exercise it by any means, the law says. So you're going to hold the governor of Central Bank responsible for monetary policy that are CBN based. But most of this are all around the president's failed stewardship from 2015 to 2023. That should be underlined. So people are making excuses and trying to tie it to people, but essentially this is President Buhari who has special approval. The second point is that I think there is a problem with the constitution of the special investigator. There is legislative oversight. This is the work the National Assembly should have done.
Absolutely.
Set up a special committee, review, take hearings, public hearing, receive memorandum, review, and go to the process, because this is institutional audit. So the notion of appointing an individual with overwhelming powers to go and look into everything, look into policies, so basically it's not clear what he's looking for. Now, there are three levels. If you allege that the policy that Emefiele executed, Naira design, for example, it's not about corruption, it's about illegal or legal. Now, if there are president approval, the act says that he has something to the president approves and executes.
Emefiele said he gave him all the documents at the Kuje prison in the front of a deputy commissioner of police attached to the fraud unit of the first CID.
I think it's correct because the report says that he was the president's son. The president-in-law, nephew, has no approval authority. So anybody who instigated the president and he signs is the president who authorized. So I think they're looking at it. It's not being advised constitutionally. If the president is influenced by his wife or anybody, but the point is that Emefiele secured
another of the president's approval.
Even the president spoke on air and said he approves.
He approves. So it is still an approval.
So there's a gap in the knowledge of this investigator. Because it's not an institutional investigator, he probably does not have the proper constitutional advisory. You can't accuse a regulator of crime for executing a policy. It may be flawed, maybe you can judge it as a flawed, but it's a policy. There's no criminality in advancing a policy.
Is it even in the place of the investigator
to know
whether it's fraud or not? Is it not the court that should decide that? Does this not boil down to hasty generalization?
I think two things are here. The hasty appointment. The president is going to investigate financial crime. You can go to EFCC. If he's going to investigate policy, it's the oversight of the National Assembly. Because there's no crime in policy. You see, two people can disagree over policy. So if Emefiele's choice of policy is wrong, and any expert can argue that probably he should design the naira. That's not a crime. The other issue you see is that the allegations, therefore, look at the issue of the bank acquisition. Now, even if this is a private bank,
TGA has come out to state,
private
the
bank,
position.
exactly.
Clearly, how they acquired $500 million from international consortium.
The person who ought to look at that is the FCCP. Acquisitions, mergers, so there must be an institutional regulator. The central bank itself and others will say, okay, did it go through process? So it's not a quick question of, he acquired through proxy. Institutions have a process to say, who did this? Open the veil. It's a rated company, you investigate the ownership, you see transactions. So I think there's some kind of sorcery going on here. You need to be clear what you're looking for.
A jaundiced, do you want to describe it as a jaundiced investigation?
I think it's a hasty one.
Yeah.
I think the president acted wrongly in impaneling a person to do the work that National Assembly does, the work that Auditor General does, the work that oversight and horizontal and vertical institutions do. An individual cannot, without even a legislative backing. It's actually arguably unconstitutional to authorize a private person without a statutory backing of the National Assembly or law to carry out oversight that are institutional, that are statutory in nature. So first, I doubt the legality, the authorization, whether it's constitutionally okay for Obaze, as part of his well-meaning position, whatever it is, to conduct this kind of investigation. Two, some of them are layered. They should be handled by institutions that are clear with processes that you could determine. Some of them are the court determined. Some of them can be done by National Assembly. Some of them will be done by EFCC. Some of them will be done by other oversight bodies that have responsibility to look at. So this bundling together, issuing a very sensational report, some of them, some unsigned. Again, the question is, when will you now go to court, real court, if there are verifiable issues, instead of doing a public trial?
But even look at this. What kind of evidence would you be adducing before, their lordships, in the court, when you said in your investigative report, you said $6.3 million was removed from the CBN through CCTV.
I mean,
isn't it? What kind of bellicose investigation is this?
That's not, and again, the people involved have said, we never did this. We didn't see it. So I think that this could be a scandal, and the cost will be big for Nigeria in terms of credibility. What the president needs to do is that if there are people who are truly, guilty of any offense, they should be processed formally in appropriate trials. If there are oversight issues, for example, procurement, there's also issues around EFCC and the humanitarian minister, you can go to court, verifiable issues. I think the problem is that there's too much of politicizing of this process. By now, there should have been verified, investigated issues that you can take to court. You take it to court, then it's no longer issue of speculation. And then the person is presumed innocent until the court so determined. But when you are doing a lot of mixing investigation and politics. For example, the government can't come out and say we are probing the Buhari administration, because essentially the man who authorized all this is the president. So you can't play dead brain and say, okay, he was his nephew. The nephew has no constitutional authorization. So whatever the president signs, whether induced by his nephew or anybody, is the president who's liable. And that's the problem why they could not prosecute Olisametu efficiently. Because if the president authorized a transaction, then they can't punish the man who received the authorization without getting the authorizer.
I haven't gotten the authorization.
Exactly. If the authorizer is acting within his power as an executive president, then the authorization is legitimate. And so you can't question that, somebody spent X amount of money authorized by the president who acted within. So if you like, you have to plead against the president. So I think this is messy now, and the pushback damages the credibility of the investigator.
And it's even getting messier
exactly.
with when they said the 593
different
banks and the
accounts.
rest. And
Again, this report should have been made public by the president officially,
Yes.
put through a procedure where people can now debate and say, well, what next?
Yeah.
Instead of, conducting, first, the by and honor, put it out cavalierly. I mean, just like, oh, hooray, we've got
the
smoking gun. That's not the way to deal with such legal institutional things. It has to be processed. And again, the mistake is that Tinubu should also be advised around President Tinubu around his powers. I don't think that a executive authorized investigator, in fact, as a matter of fact, has no competence to investigate the Central Bank of Nigeria. The Central Bank is a bank whose independence is secured by the Act. And therefore, there must be institutionalized process for auditing it. The General National Assembly itself. The president has a power appoint and policy direction. I doubt if he has the power to single. We have no special counsel act that authorizes appointment of independent
investigator or independent
because if you have that
prosecutor.
law, you have their powers, oversight, control, what they can do, even how they can issue reports. So this is uncharted territory. We don't have the regulatory framework guiding it, and therefore the appointment of this guy is like authorizing a citizen to go ballistic.
I'm sure Lateef Fagbemi and the Attorney General would be looking at some of the issues.
If they understand administrative law, if they do understand it, then they can look at it.
All right. Thank you so very much, Dr. Sam Amadi.